Please, don't go. The woman's voice trembled as she clung to the red-coated guard, her tears soaking the crisp wool of his uniform. Around them, tourists froze mid-step, cameras lowered. No one had ever seen a Queen's Guard move, let alone embrace someone. But in that moment, duty bowed to humanity. It was a chilly London afternoon, the kind where fog curled around the stone walls of Buckingham Palace like a living thing the crowd had gathered for the changing of the guard. That timeless ritual of precision and stoicism. Every movement measured, every face emotionless. And then among the sea of curious onlookers stood a woman named Amelia Rivers. She was clutching a folded letter, worn at the edges, her fingers trembling as though the paper itself burned to hold its secret. In front of her, standing tall and silent, was Corporal James Harland, a royal guard known for his discipline and unwavering posture. For years, he had been the perfect embodiment of British composure, silent, strong, untouchable. But that day, everything changed. Amelia was an ordinary woman, hair slightly tousled, shoes scuffed from the cobblestones, eyes heavy with sleepless nights. She didn't belong in the world of crisp uniforms and gilded gates. James, on the other hand, was the image of duty. Polished brass buttons gleamed in the afternoon light, his bearskin hat casting a proud shadow across his face. He was the kind of man who followed rules even when no one was watching, and that's exactly why what happened next shocked the world. When the ceremony ended, the other guards marched away in synchronized perfection, but Amelia stayed behind, tears glistening in her eyes. She stepped forward, breaking the invisible barrier between tourists and the guards. "James," she whispered, voice quivering. The guard didn't move. He wasn't supposed to. He couldn't. But his jaw tightened, a subtle flicker of emotion that didn't go unnoticed. "You can't ignore me forever," she said, her voice cracking. "I came all this way because I had to tell you, before it's too late." The crowd began to murmur. Phones rose in the air. The royal guard never broke formation, never spoke, never reacted. But as Amelia's sob echoed against the stone walls, something inside James shifted. 2 years earlier, James had been deployed overseas, serving in a conflict far from home. During a bombing raid, he was rescued, pulled from the rubble by a young field nurse who refused to abandon him, even as the ground shook beneath them. That nurse was Amelia. They had grown close during his recovery. Letters turned into late-night talks, and talks turned into love. But when he was reassigned to ceremonial duty at Buckingham, James had to cut ties. Guards were expected to remain detached, emotionally and publicly. Amelia never heard from him again, until she saw him one morning in a photo, posted online by a tourist, standing outside the palace gates, the man she'd saved, the man she loved. And now she stood before him, trying to remind him he was more than a uniform. "I kept your letters," she whispered, "every one of them. You said you'd find me when it was safe. But you never did. Why, James? Why did you let me think you were gone?" His hand, rigid at his side, twitched. For a brief moment, he wasn't the guard. He was the man she'd once nursed back to life. A single tear escaped her eye. "You once told me you'd fight for what mattered most, so fight now, please." Then, breaking every rule written in centuries of tradition, James moved. He took one step forward, then another. The crowd gasped. Cameras clicked wildly. The officer beside him began to shout an order. But before the words could leave his lips, James reached out and pulled Amelia into his arms. The bearskin hat brushed against her cheek as he held her close. His voice, low, trembling, real, broke the silence. "I never stopped loving you." For several seconds, the world seemed to stop. The crowd that had gathered out of curiosity now stood in reverent silence. It wasn't just a guard and a woman. It was love defying duty, emotion conquering decorum. When the senior officer approached, his expression unreadable, James slowly stepped back, standing at attention once more. But something had changed, even under the rigid formality of his stance. The warmth in his eyes told the truth. Amelia smiled through her tears. "That's all I needed to hear," she whispered. Then she turned and walked away, her figure disappearing into the London fog. The next morning, the photograph of that moment was everywhere. On the front page of newspapers, trending across social media. Headlines screaming, "Royal Guard breaks protocol in heartfelt embrace," world reacts. Some criticized him, others celebrated him. But when asked by his commanding officer if he regretted his action, James simply said, "No, sir. Sometimes doing what's right isn't in the manual." That single act changed more than just his career. It changed the hearts of those who witnessed it. It reminded everyone that behind every symbol of authority, behind every uniform or stoic mask, there's a human being capable of deep feeling. James was reassigned a few months later, not as punishment, but to train new recruits. His lesson wasn't about marching or posture. It was about humanity. Discipline matters, he'd say, but never forget why you serve. Protecting others begins with compassion. Amelia eventually received a letter, handwritten, sealed with the emblem of the guards inside, a single sentence. "You saved my life twice, once in war and once with love." Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who choose to show emotion when the world expects silence. And sometimes the quietest acts of love echo the loudest across time. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts below. Because love, even in the strictest of places, finds its way through.